Yes. Wow. All right. My man, J Rock. Thank you.
And we're, there we are. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this second community conversation on race. My name is Joe Scarborough. I am the Director of Performing Arts here at Skycrest, and I am also directing the musical Ragtime that we are producing here at church in the coming weeks. As part of that presentation, we are hosting these weekly discussions. I led the one last week on the themes of race and immigration in Ragtime the Musical. This evening we have a close personal friend of mine, Gabe Flores, who's going to be leading this discussion. Gabe is a playwright and director and performer in the community theater and regional theater scene. He is also an educator with Hillsborough County Public Schools, and I really look forward to what he has to say this evening, and I know you will too. Thank you so much. Here's Gabe.
Yes, I'm live. All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. As I was introduced, again, my name is Gabe Flores. I work for Hillsborough County Public Schools. I'm a site-based administrator, which is a fancy word for assistant principal. I'm very excited to be here. I want to thank Joe Scarborough and the Skycrest team for inviting me to be part of this. My goals for tonight, I don't want this to be a gripe session about how things should be or could be. Basically, we're not going to fix this problem here in this conversation, or the issues, the concerns, whichever way you want to frame it. The conversation doesn't end with this talk either. So hopefully after we talk and I talk, there's a few nuggets that you can all kind of take away from this, and hopefully whether you have children in the school system yourselves, or if you know someone in the school system or just want to help the school system, maybe you might reframe some of your thoughts. And when we get to kind of the Q&A session, hopefully the more questions you have, the better. So I want to thank you all for being here. Those of you who are in the sanctuary, those of you that are with us virtually, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your day to discuss race and education. So I want to start tonight talking about kind of why I chose the title for tonight. So the title tonight is Race to the Top. Now, the nice thing about that, it's kind of a loaded title. For those who you're not aware, it was a 2009 education reform bill by President Obama, basically to put about $4 and a change billion into public education to help create a incentive structure for schools to find new and innovative ways to race to the top. But as we've kind of learned, we're still kind of not quite there. Here in Florida, we're still kind of on the lower half of, quality of education, however you want to frame that. And, as great as competition is, someone has to win and someone has to lose. So let's talk about race in education. My notes here. All right. So when I'm talking in generalities. I'm not talking about my school. I'm not talking about every single school. I'm just kind of talking from, experiences I've had in relation to a lot of the research. And the research that I'm looking from comes from the Brookings Institute, which is a public policy forum company in Washington, D.C. that looks at a lot of the stuff, ACLU, that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to make sure I have my sources are, universally accepted. So kind of the big push, at least in Hillsborough County, has really been graduation rates. Make sure everyone is, ready to preparing kids for life. That's what we say. College and career ready was kind of the buzzwords many, many years ago, but now it's just preparing for life, whatever that might be. What they're really looking for is making sure when you step off of a Hillsborough County campus or out of a state of Florida public education campus, you are ready for whatever is next, whether that is college, 2-year, 4-year, whether that's a vocational program, whether you want to learn a trade, an apprenticeship, something like that, or you want to join the military. You are leaving public education with all the skills you need to be successful in whatever that might be. What we are seeing is the students that tend to not be quite ready generally tend to come from the lower socioeconomic households that generally tend to be minority households, and that just is a fact of life. And it's our job to notice it, understand it, try and figure out why it's happening, and try and give more supports to those students and families so they can be successful for life. So again, being ready for school. A lot of times what we see is, students coming to school generally from lower socioeconomics are not ready for those first couple of years of schools. Research shows that kindergarten, first grade, second grade, those are the most important years for education. So students who are successful those 3 years tend to be successful all through their public education careers, if you will. Students who are held back in one of those years their dropout rate doubles, triples. If they retain more than 2 years, they're almost guaranteed to drop out before they finish public education. And unfortunately, those students generally tend to come from either lower socioeconomic or from minority households. So understanding that, being aware of that, knowing the environments that these students come from helps us as educators try and do our best to make sure that they are successful, they're safe, and they can look towards the future, not worry about what's just happening today. How we can do that, a big thing that they teach us in, as we're going through our professional development, becoming more effective educators, is making sure that we either are aware or we are cognizant of our implicit bias. Now, our implicit bias is, when you're walking down the hallways and you see 2 kids walking, one's white kid, one could be a student of color, and you have to address one of those kids. Which one are you going to address? Unfortunately, I hate to say it, a lot of times it's going to be the student of color, because in some way in our minds, we think that the student who's a minority is probably going to be more likely to cause trouble than that white kid. Now, that's just kind of a fact of life, and in understanding that, when you see a student of color or whatever, and understanding that we have these implicit biases, we understand that we see one type of person or another type of person, we think differently. So understanding that, trying to be objective as possible, addressing both of those students is really what we should be doing as educators. When we're in classes and we see 2 students struggling, if we have a student who is a minority, we might think, oh, they probably don't care about education. Oh, they might, come from a home that's less, less educationally minded. And we might have a student who, we just might think, oh, they just need extra help. So understanding those thoughts could be in our head. We have to make sure that we're being as objective as possible and trying to give these students the best education they possibly can. Another thing that we see a lot in education is generally the higher level classes, our international baccalaureate programs, our advanced placement, aka our AP classes, generally tend to be more of those white and Asian kids. For whatever reason, that's just kind of how it's become. Then you get to those general level classes, and sometimes we have students with special needs, and that was where we see a lot more of the diversity, a lot more of the different learning styles, learning differences. I hesitate to use the word disability because that's, more of a judgment call, just learning differences. And when students tend to be around the same type of people or other types of students, same time every day, struggling in classes, that becomes their reality. And us as educators, we have to make sure that we're doing our best to make sure whether we're teaching students that are at the highest possible level, they're scoring level fours, level fives, which is the highest levels you can score on, aptitude tests in the public education system, scoring 13, 1400s on the SATs. We as educators need to make sure that we're giving those students who are scoring that high the same level of engagement that students that are scoring very low, level ones, level twos, students who are 16, 17, 18, 19 years old and still have not passed a reading test in high school. It's up to us to really make sure that we are giving them the most quality education we can and not just trying to give them as little as possible, just pass them along. That's where the system sometimes can fail students, and acknowledging that and understanding that is where we as educators have to make that change. I can speak for my particular school. Our principal acknowledges that, and one thing he likes to do is in one of our core areas, our social studies department, what he's done what's called the honors initiative. And essentially what he's doing with that is he got rid of all the general level classes. So we still have our AP classes, which are for our highest performing, highest motivated students. But everybody else is all taking honors classes. So instead of delineating our AP, our higher performing students than everybody else, it's kind of, yeah, you want AP, you go for that highest level, and then everyone else is here, whether you are level 4, level 5, or you're level 1, level 2. And the nice thing about that is what we can do is we can spread those kids out instead of having, one class of 24 to 30 level 1 students that are struggling, not having the materials, whatever, which sometimes those students generally tend to be students of color. They are mixed in, they're blended with all other students who are generally in those honors classes, which don't always have to be just the white kids, but the kids who are more highly motivated. So those kids tend to blend more. We've seen great success with that. Obviously, with a bell curve, you're still going to have some kids that are going to excel at the highest level no matter what. You're going to have some kids that are going to struggle no matter what you do. But hopefully that bell curve, those standard deviations are much larger than they would be if you just put them in those 3 boxes of the AP, the honors, and the general classes. One thing that I've noticed as an educator and now as an administrator is kind of that difference between pedagogy and andragogy. These might be kind of new words for some of you. Pedagogy is how we teach children, how we teach them to learn, how we teach them how we teach them. Andragogy is how we're teaching adults. And generally what we're seeing is when we're teaching adults, we're teaching them a skill to learn, to take those skills to the next phase, next level, whatever you want to, however you want to use that, those words. So for instance, when we are teaching in a school setting, we have standards we have to teach, we have strategies, we have, ways to teach these students, and they have to learn their math, their science, their social studies, their English, reading, maybe an elective here or there. When we go to the more andragogy stage, we're going to teach you a skill. And this one skill is going to prepare you for the next level, the next phase, whether that's auto mechanics, plumbing, electricians, any of those kind of trades. You're learning exactly what you need to know, not learning every possible option of it. You're learning exactly what you're supposed to know. And that's why generally adults learn better in that setting, because they need to know why I'm learning what I'm learning right now is going to help me today, tomorrow, and the next day. Whereas in schools, what we do a lot of times, we say, okay, you need to learn algebra 2 today. We're doing quadratic formulas. And a lot of times, some students will say, okay, this is what I have to do today. Some students say, I have no idea why I'm learning this. I'm never going to use this. So that in and of itself becomes a problem. One thing in my experience is bad kids and bored kids exhibit the similar behaviors. I'll say that again. Bad kids and bored kids exhibit the same behaviors. So if a kid is going to be bad, make choices that are going to affect the education of others, then that's what it is. But generally, when kids are bored, they try to seek attention, and then they're going to get into trouble. So it's us as teachers to make sure what we are teaching now, what we're teaching today, is going to make sense to them today so that they are more engaged. So even though we still have to teach them the quadratic formula and that kind of stuff, we have to make sure that what they're learning today will affect them today. And generally, in my experience, students from lower socioeconomics and students from minority backgrounds tend to respond a lot better to that more andragogical approach, which is what I'm doing right now will affect me right now, and it might help me tomorrow, but I need to know right now how this is going to help me. So us in education need to take that into account, that generally in lower socioeconomic students from minority backgrounds, they need to know why they're learning right now. There's a big shift in education in the last 5 or 10 years or so about, again, preparing students for life. It's not just about college. It's what are we doing now that's going to prepare them for life. And looking at those colleges, looking at the next phase in life. Sometimes you do see a divide in the quality of colleges that are designed for students, general students, and then also, HBCUs, which have always kind of gotten a bad rap over the years. I think our new Vice President, Kamala Harris, will hopefully bring new light and new spotlight on HBCUs, excuse me. So that should be hopefully, great for that. So going back to, again, bored kids and bad kids exhibiting similar behaviors. Then we get into kind of a divisive issue, a divisive topic, which is on the forefront of many teachers' minds. It's on the forefront of many parents' minds. It's what we call the school to prison pipeline. In my role, I do everything I can to make sure that students don't feel like it's a school to prison pipeline. For those of you who are not familiar with that term, essentially what that's saying is students that generally get in trouble a lot, basically they get in trouble in school, they get in trouble once they get to high school. At that point, they're looking at, almost sometimes being tried as adults. They end up, doing felonies, stealing cars, weapons charges, something like that. And then they go right off to prison. And then basically they went from school to prison. According to the ACLU, in America, 51% of students in public education are white. 16% are Black students. That's the information I have in the ACLU. Now, students with multiple suspensions, felony charges, that kind of stuff, who are looking at expulsion from school or a change of environment, which we call it now. 31% of those kids who get multiple suspensions, we're looking at those types of highest level of disciplinary action. That is about, again, 31% is white kids. Now, 42% of those students tend to be Black or other students of color. So we're seeing that even though only 16% of our student population is that Black student, 40% of our students who tend to get in trouble a lot are those same Black students. And Black students do represent most of our school arrests. Now that could be weapons, it could be drugs, it could be fighting, it could be what they call continuous disruptive behavior, where they always seem to be in trouble, they're always causing problems, they're always doing something. Now, it goes back to us as educators to make sure that why is this student acting the way they are? If a student steals a car off campus, that's a choice that student made for whatever reason that earned them to be arrested. Now, when things happen on our campus or on your campus, that question always comes back to us. What are we doing? Are we not doing enough to support the student? And it goes back to, if we're more engaging in the classroom, if we have more relevant material, if we have more pathways to success for them. So a lot of these students come from, lower economic homes. Education may not be the top priority of the home. It's more food on the table, making sure we keep the house. We're not going to get evicted at the end of the month, making sure my car doesn't break down. Those are the pressing issues at their household. Not, oh, what college do you want to go to? They're worried about that kind of stuff. So if we can do our best to make sure that education, they can see the value in it, and again, what they're doing today will affect them today and tomorrow, they're hopefully more likely to engage in what we're doing, see that when they show up to school prepared, ready to go, that will have the same opportunities that everybody else has. They just have to want it. They have to actually try, show up, do the work, be the man in the arena. All right. So before I go into my next section, does anyone have any questions about anything I might have said in the last 20 minutes or so? I have a few other topics I want to talk about, but I want to make sure it's not just me rambling for an hour. Anybody out there have a question or want to send me a question or anything like that? No? Okay. So the big question is, how do we take everything I just said, and how do we actually put that into practice? And making sure that we're not disingenuous, making sure that we are actually being, a positive influence on these students. On my campus, on most campuses, every single student or every single teacher and administrator had a teacher at some point that said, hey, oh, good. I just saw in the chat box. Okay. So like I was saying, all right. So, where was I? Oh yeah. So every teacher and every administrator on this campus, and probably every campus in the world, they all had a teacher that at some point sat them down and said, "Hey, you're good at X. You need to keep doing this because you're great at this." And then we all sat back and said, "Yeah, I am pretty good at this. Let me just keep going." Because generally, a lot of times, at least for me and my experiences, my parents didn't really understand what I was good at. I was good at music. I was good at skateboarding, that kind of stuff. My parents, didn't really understand that. But it wasn't until I got to high school, about 10th grade, I had an English teacher that said I was very good at writing. And when we wrote poems, I was very good at, using all the different metaphors and that kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, wow, yeah, I actually am pretty good at this. I should keep doing this. And if that teacher had never told me that, then I'm not sure if I would have kept doing that. And now I have a college degree in writing. And I was an English teacher before I became an administrator. So it's just funny how, if a teacher says one thing, that could change, a whole student's life around. So we have to make sure that, we hold that power. Anybody watching, listening, attending, anything you could say to a child, to a student, could turn everything around. A smile in the morning can turn the kid's whole day around. I had a student last week who showed up late to school, angry at the world, didn't want to go to class. I sat him down. I said, I think you need to, I think we need to spend some time in detention for a couple of hours. He blew up, yelled and screamed, left my office. I tried to make sure I can at least make sure I knew where he was. Lost him around campus. He showed up somewhere later. I called the parent. Hey, such and such had this episode. He had a problem with the teacher. He left. I had him. I'm just trying to keep him accountable. The mom's like, well, this morning, his father and I had a conversation about how we're gonna get divorced. So that's what this kid's coming to school with. All I could have done was just sit the kid down and say, what's wrong? Instead of trying to correct his behavior, I could have asked him, what's going on? He could have opened up to me, and then maybe I could have turned his day around. So that moment, I personally failed. But sometimes when we fail, that's when we learn the most. And that's something that, they're also trying to change in the education world is they are implementing a term called a positive struggle. sorry, a progressive struggle is the word they're trying to put in there. So what we notice a lot of times is students who struggle in academics, whatever that might be, math, science, English, social studies, whatever. Usually they live in a world now that's with such instant gratification that if they don't get the answer right the first time, they throw their hands up. I don't know. I can't get it. And, you know, it's us as teachers to make sure we are coaching the next generation that you have to push through. You have to persevere. You need that grit to really push through and really make sure that you are that you're persevering and that you're working through these things, which unfortunately a lot of students don't have that. Whether it's, you know, woe is me, whether it's their someone in their household, you know, told them they're not good at something, so they say, yeah, I am not good at something. Then they get question number 3 wrong on their math test, and they throw the pen down. Yeah, I am good, not good at anything. Yeah, I am bad at this. I'm mostly bad at everything. So whether that's a race thing, whether that's a socioeconomic thing, it's just all about mindsets and how we can change the mindsets of students. Now, that's a double-edged sword, because when we are trying to change mindsets and we are trying to make sure that students are successful, we as educators, you know, we can try and be as woke as we want to be. We can try to be as, you know, we can try and be walking social justice warriors, but we have to make sure we're not going into that toxic positivity realm, which can easily happen where everything's great and doesn't matter what's happening outside of your world. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's happening outside of the school. When you're in my 4 walls, everything's wonderful. You know, a lot of students, generally students of color and students from low socioeconomics, can't turn it off. They come to school, they're hungry. They come to school, their lights just got turned off. Their parents' car just died and they had to walk 3 miles to school. So they're not ready for your positivity when they walk into your classroom, that everything's perfect and everything's gonna be fine for these 48 minutes, however long they spend in your classroom. So again, being aware that these students do come with baggage, and unfortunately, the pandemic's not helping that. Where we have food insecure households, we have, you know, we have evictions, we have people dying of COVID every single day. I know at my personal school, I personally have quarantined hundreds of students, and we're kind of on the low end for my county as far as students being quarantined. There's other schools that have gone into the thousands of, you know, having to quarantine students. What's that, Joe? Okay. um, so just being mindful of what these students are coming in with. Um, and with that being said, let's bring it back to ragtime, because the whole thing, reason we're doing this, and I appreciate Joe for letting me speak tonight, is we're doing Ragtime the musical, and basically it is, excuse me, it's 3 families who see America the way they see it. We have Mother, who comes from a well-to-do family. We have Tata, who I play. So if you're coming to see Ragtime, come see me as Tata. It's a lot of fun. Who is coming to America with his little girl. Then we have Coalhouse, who is from Harlem, and he has his young child. So Mother has a child, Tata has a child, Coalhouse has a child. And I think it goes without saying that every parent wants what's best for their children, and they will do everything they can for their children. You know, I think Tata, his arc in the story, the first time we hear him talk, he says the little girl was all that he had now. You know, together they would escape. And every time we see Tata, he is so excited to be in America, because this is the way, this is the land of opportunity. We're going to find success in this land. And he's instilling that in his daughter, as, you know, many immigrants did. And in a similar way, that's kind of like, if we're going to use our metaphor, education kind of is like America in Tata's eyes. This is the land of opportunities. If you go to school, if you work as hard as you possibly can, and you don't be distracted. You put the blinders up and just get the job done and work as hard as you possibly can. You will be successful. And that is kind of one thing that resonates with with Tata's character with me, is how insistent he is on being on just making sure that his daughter, the little girl, is successful, that she has a better life than he had. Cole House's character, he has a young son that we find towards the end of the first act, and they sing a beautiful song, Wheels of a Dream. And what they're worried about is making sure that their son basically sees America and sees the world that they hope that the world that they hope for. And when he is old enough, I will show him America, and our son will ride on the wheels of a dream. So that car kind of symbolizes the dream. I think Joe talked about the symbolism of the car last week. And whether it is the car, which is the symbol of hope, whether it's America, which is the symbol of hope, whatever it might be, insert your symbol of hope, your symbol of getting out of your circumstances. Knowing more about a subject, which is kind of Education 101, will help you get there. And again, making sure that we're not being too positive about it. We're not overlooking the differences that we have in each other. Now, there is kind of another idea when we're talking about implicit bias and race and that kind of stuff, and that some teachers say, well, I don't even see race. I look at all my students and they're just students. Yeah, I got 4 black kids, I got an Asian kid, I got 6 Spanish kids and 10 white kids. It's like, well, okay, you just saw race. And you need to understand they all come from diverse backgrounds. They all have different views of the world. They all see the world differently. And as great as you want to be to treat them all equal, we want to make sure that we're equitable. That seems to be the big push right now in education, is for a long time it's all about equality. We go back to Plessy versus Ferguson, where it was separate but equal. Okay. And we all know how that worked out. Schools with white kids were fine. Schools that were, not in the white areas were not equal. And then we had Brown versus the Board of Education, which kind of stopped that idea altogether of separate and equal. And then even though we had equal schools, they ended up not being equal, because this was, not that long ago. Ruby Bridges was, she had to be walked to her school by the National Guard, I believe it was. So just understanding that, yes, there is differences in what these students bring. And again, we're talking about equality versus equity. There's, this famous picture of, 3 students or 3 young people at a baseball game, and they're all trying to see over the fence to look at the game. One student is tall, they can see over just fine. One student is kind of at the top of the fence and can kind of see over, and then one student's too short and can't see at all. So they ask, do you want equality, where everyone gets a 2-foot box to stand on, where the tall person doesn't really need that much extra because they can already see over, but they're 2 feet taller now? Good. We have the one person that was kind of at the top of the fence. They are now a little taller. They're good. Now we have our short person who, even with a 2-foot box, can't see over that fence. So even though we gave that person the same thing we gave everybody else, it still wasn't enough. So the idea now is we want equity, where the tall person who can see over the fence doesn't really need anything above and beyond what we're already giving them. The middle height person, they can kind of see, and that extra box is just enough. That shorter person needs a lot more support and a lot more services, so they can see over the fence. So making sure that we give every student what they need. So if a student comes to school, let's say, a white kid who 2-parent household, they vacation all the time. Both parents went to college. They're both, middle management in their jobs. It's a stable household. They come to school. all you have to do for that student is say, hey, here's the assignment on the board. Let's get started. If you have any questions, let me know. That student says, great, awesome. My parents told me education is important. I'm here to get my work done. Then you have another student, let's say they're Hispanic, like me, and they woke up in a house with very little food. They have dirty clothes. They have, they don't have any supplies. They show up to your school. They're worried about, am I going to have food when I go home? Am I going to get beat? Am I going to get made fun of for having dirty pants at school? Are they going to make fun of my off-brand sneakers? So that's what that kid's worried about. They don't really care that I have to read pages 5 through 10 and then write, 10 questions or answer 10 questions about it. They're not worried about that. So that's going to require a little more effort from the teacher. That's that equity piece. So our first student doesn't really need a whole lot of extra stuff. So you say, get the work done, cool. This other student, you're going to have to give them a little more effort. How's it going? Let's get started. Let me help you. Make sure that you put your name on the paper. Oh, you don't have any paper? Here's have something. Get started. Let's make the most of this day we have together. And again, just your little bit of empathy, your little bit of going above and beyond could turn that kid's day around. So understanding that when we have differences, it's a real fine line you have to walk, because yes, you have to acknowledge it. Yes, you have to call it out, but you also have to understand how it plays. So understanding when a student comes to you and they have all of those challenges and differences with them, how are you going to teach that student? How are you going to make sure that student is successful during that moment in your class, in your four walls? What do you have to do? So those are the kind of questions that teachers ask themselves every single day. Now that I'm an administrator, I get the front row seat where I have to evaluate teachers and observe teachers to do this every single day. Now I see some great stuff, and I see some stuff that is going to need some tweaks, and it's going to be some areas of focus for that teacher. Where if a kid's asking a question, they generally want something. They may be loud about it. They may be a little disruptive about it. But you need to take a step back and say, why is the student being disruptive? Is it because that they want to disrupt class? Or is it because they have 4 brothers and sisters at home, and the only way they're heard at home is to be loud? So when they come to our school, they're just loud. That's the way they are. So again, understanding the differences and why students do what they do and act the way they act is very important for the mind of a teacher. So we might have a student walk in loud, miss, I need this, miss, and they're just loud. And a teacher who, doesn't have that understanding of implicit biases, or doesn't have their faculties about them, will just be like, well, just get out of my class. You don't deserve to learn today. You're disrupting it for everybody else. It's like, okay, yes, they were being disruptive, but they still have a right to free and appropriate education. Okay. So making sure that you see what's going on with that. All right. So that moment, what you would want to do is say, all right, everybody else, you guys are all set. Keep working on this. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to take care of, such and such out here. And then, we step in the hall, what's going on, and that's how you get that student back in. That's how you can help them be successful. They might blow up in a later classroom or something else, but at least during my 48 minutes, I was able to turn that kid around for that day. And that kid learned something. And, that's really all. We're fighting these little battles every single day. Are there any other questions or comments, concerns before I go into my next part? Anyone? Okay. All right, so for those who can't see the question in the chat box, it says, in ragtime, like I said, the children have strong parents. What are ways the teachers can fill in those gaps with students who don't? So to help fill in those gaps with, we have students who have, you know, one parent, no parents. Sometimes they're homeless and they're in shelters, that kind of stuff. Um, Basically, what I've seen in my experience is students want to know that they are appreciated, that they are special, that they are just like everybody else. Um, Understanding that students come from a variety of backgrounds. Again, it's that equity versus equality piece. If I uh, tell everyone you had a great day or have a great day, you did awesome on this test. Cool. I told everybody the same thing, but there might be a student out there that has no one at home telling them that they are doing great. They have no one at home saying you should keep working. And if I know that that student has an issue with their custodial parent, um, that's the type of kid that you could say, hey, stay after class for just a moment. I want to say something to you. So before they leave, everyone else is out of the room. It's just you and that one kid. And you say, listen, I know that, things are tough for you, but you did awesome. If you keep doing this, you're going to be great. And when you walk across that stage, I'm going to shake your hand. And I can't wait to see you be successful in life. So just saying the things that the kids want to hear. I think every student wants to hear that they're good at something. Every student deserves to be good at something, and every student deserves an opportunity to show that they're good at something. So that's what us as teachers can do. Unfortunately, I had a student a couple weeks ago come to my office and tell me that her mother is a drunk, her sister is a drug addict, her dad's in prison. So that in and of itself tells me she has a very unstable household. Then she told me her boyfriend started doing drugs as well, so she dumped him because she already has that at home. She doesn't need that from her boyfriend. So what I can do every time I come in contact with that student, I tell her, today's going to be great. I'm glad that you're here. I'm excited that you're going to learn something today. Because I don't know what she woke up to. I don't know what she's going to bed to. But if I could put a smile on her face, I might be able to turn her day around. And if I can turn her day around, she might be more inclined to go to her next class and learn something. And if she's positive there, then the next class is positive. And then even if she's going to an unstable household, she can control what's happening at school. A lot of times students need that control. They want to know that they're in control of their lives and control of their educations. And sometimes there's circumstances in their household and their families where it's not that. So if we can show them that they are successful, that they can have control, that's where kind of success is going to turn around. I think that's one thing in Ragtime that Tata's character and Colehouse's character and actually Mother's character, they all kind of lose control of their life for a little bit. So Mother thinks life is perfect and grand and everything. She has a husband that takes good care of her. She has a nice big house. She lives in high society of New Rochelle, New York. And then her husband just leaves, because the life they have isn't enough for him. So she leaves and goes out, or he leaves, goes out to the North Pole to explore. So she's left with the family. She's left with, a little boy and all of that. And she's able to kind of see the world a little bit differently. She kind of loses control of what she thought she had. Tata comes to America thinking that America's gonna be one way, and then next thing we know, he's working in essentially a sweatshop at the Loom, getting $6 a day. There's worms in the scraps of food he's being fed. His daughter is shivering. He's not sure if she can eat. So again, he's losing control of what he thought his life would be. Then we have Colehouse's character, where Colehouse, when we meet him, he's a very well-to-do, accomplished musician. He does well enough that he can afford a Model T, which was again one of the first cars, and to have a car, that was a big deal. But then he goes to the wrong neighborhood, meets Willie Conklin and the other firefighters, and then they destroy the car. Spoiler alert, sorry, Joe. But then kind of Colehouse, at that point, he kind of loses control of what he is he thought his life was going to be. At that point, he almost becomes like a bloodlust almost against Willie Conklin. He just wants justice for what happened to him. So to take it back to those to the students who don't have a stable household, once that control is lost, it takes that effort to get it back. So I think Tata does that. He figures out to make a flip book of silhouettes, and then that's when he starts to gain control of his life again. Mother starts to kind of see Tata a little differently and starts to kind of gain control of her life. Cole House, not so much. You'll have to see Ragtime for that. But I think when we have students who don't have a stable household, don't have a stable environment, who are unsure of what the next moves are going to be, if we can help give them that control back, at least in one aspect of their life, that could turn them around. Hopefully before they do something, make a grown-up decision that's going to have grown-up consequences. That's what I tell kids all the time. If you want to smoke drugs and if you want to steal cars and have weapons, those are grown-up decisions. You got to really ready for those grown-up consequences. So just trying to expose them to what could be as early as possible. And then if they make their decision, they make their decision. But we do the best we can to make sure to keep them safe and hopefully make them successful. I know that hopefully that answered that question. Are there any other questions, Mr. Joe? Okay. So I guess this last little part is kind of where we've seen a big disparity in race and education in the last year, actually 11 months, is with COVID and with e-learning and with students learning from home. I think what we noticed right away is last year I was working in a school that was very high poverty school, mostly minority students, and as soon as the government made a decision for all schools to be closed, most of those students didn't have access to technology. They required a school computer. So they came and they got the computer, but then they had that computer and then they had no Wi-Fi because they had no job, or they lost their job or whatever. And then they had no Wi-Fi. They couldn't connect to the teachers. And then it kind of became the snowball effect of students losing their educational time. Some students were totally fine. Some students woke up, oh, okay, they got their computer, their little webcam, and there was no time lost. But there's a lot of students out there that, for whatever reason, and generally it's those lower SES and lower, or those minority students who had issues with technology. So that's where we've seen kind of the biggest disparity in education right now is students who have access to technology and students who don't have access to technology. Another thing is we have those students who don't have access to technology are sometimes forced to come back to school, so that's the only way that they're going to get their education. Even though they know that they're possibly being exposed to COVID or that kind of stuff, they really have no other choice, because if they stayed home or if they were forced to be home, then they would have no way to do any of their work. They don't have a phone. Maybe if they have Wi-Fi, it's a very limited amount of Wi-Fi. And then those students just kind of do other things, give up and move on. They kind of just start hustling, whatever that might be. It could be legal or illegal things. They just have to start, they need to put food on the table. So they have to start working. So it's up to us as educators to really make sure that we're doing our best to stay connected while we're distant. And we're also making the most of the time the students are here on campus. So generally, the students who come to campus are the ones who either want social interaction or they have no other option but to come to school because they do not have the technology that other students have. And also understanding that as well, because when a student is sent home because they had an exposure to a COVID positive, whether it's a teacher, student, custodian, whatever, they have to go home for at least 10 days. Now, in those 10 days, what we're telling those kids is, hey, you should be learning from home while you're out. But then we're required to tell them if you don't do any work, or if you have a connectivity issue, whether that's, your phone gives out, computer doesn't work, whatever. You can make up any work you missed this time while you're out, and you can make it up when you get back with no penalty. So that kind of gives the student kind of free rein to not do anything. So at that point, they are 2 weeks out of school and they've done nothing. So now they're 2 weeks behind. And then it takes 2 to 3 weeks to catch up those 2 weeks. And then it's just kind of this endless cycle of never being able to get caught back up with the pace of the class. And since we started school, at least in Hillsborough County, started 2 to 3 weeks later, everything's pushed back already. So making sure that we do our best to keep the kids on pace. Us as educators, we kind of have to basically be social workers is what we have to do, is we have to make sure we're keeping up with these kids. If they are at home and they're not checking in electronically, we have to pick up the phone and start calling people. Hey, where's Johnny? Where's Jimmy? Where's Janie? How is she doing? How can I help? Do you want to come pick up work at the school? Do I need my social worker to come drop it off for you? So just trying to make sure, like that equity piece. Some kids will go home and they're fine. Some kids have to go home and they need a lot more supports. So it's up to us as educators to make sure we identify that and know that. A lot of times those issues do have things to do with socioeconomics and with race. And again, it's important to make sure that we call it out, but we also understand how it plays. We have to know that, if one family is evicted, they're probably gonna go live with a cousin or an uncle or something like that. Now there's 9 people in a 2-bedroom house or something like that, and then it's chaos. I'm not gonna learn anything in there. So just being mindful of kind of the psyche of teenagers these days, especially a minority teenager. Unfortunately, there's a mindset where a lot of students feel like they're persecuted. They feel like they are targeted. They feel like they are constantly being, picked on because of the color of their skin, because of the way they present themselves. So there's been many times where I'll be talking to a student in the hallway. Hey, I need you to do such and such. And the student will look me dead in the eye and say, oh, it's because I'm Black, right? Totally serious, not trying to be funny, because at some point in their life, they were told you will be targeted. You will be the subject of a search. You will be you will get a second look for no other reason than the color of your skin. They say that racism is passed down through our children. It's a learned trait, unfortunately, and that is it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, especially when you're just asking a kid to pull their pants up. You're asking a kid to get to class on time. You're asking a kid to, just stop talking for a moment so I can finish the instructions. Oh, it's because I'm Black. It's like, come on, like it has nothing to do with you being Black, but that seems to be their way to kind of, maybe point, kind of pick at the white guilt sometimes of some of the teachers out there. And they've probably used it once and it worked, and they keep on using it. So it's up to us as teachers to make sure that we are aware that could happen, how we say things to certain students are going to be received. Am I correcting this student because they're doing something incorrectly, or is it because the way they look and the way they carry themselves tells me that they'll probably do something, So we as educators make sure that we're not profiling. We need to make sure that we are being equitable. We need to make sure that we are doing 2 things. I tell all my students that come in my office, there's only 2 things I care about when you're on my campus. 1, I care that you're safe, and 1, I care that you're successful. 2, I care that you're successful. So creating that safe environment, doesn't matter if you're white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, or Indian, something else, doesn't matter. When you come to our campus, you are accepted for who you are, and we respect your differences. And then because of that, you'll be able to have that progressive struggle. You'll be able to try new things and be exposed to new things to help you be successful. You'll be exposed to different cultures. You'll be exposed to different learning styles in your classroom. And as the more that happens, the more life experience you're going to gain, the more successful you will become. And that's really the goal us for education. You know, we can easily state that, oh, our graduation rates in Hillsborough County have gone up like 25%. I think we're about 88%, I think, right now for the district. In the last year that we have data, and it was about 65% graduation rate when I graduated many years ago. So in the last 20 years or so, it's gone up significantly. You can easily make data say whatever you want. You can say, oh, we graduated 88%. Oh, but yeah, you kicked out all these other kids that are sent them to other schools first. Or, oh yeah, you lowered the bar a little bit for this kid so he can graduate. So you can make data say whatever you want, but there's not much you can do, or there's fewer things that you can do than actually turn the day of a child around. There's no real hard data on that. That's something you just see it, you do it, and you hope that that student's day turns around. Because we're not guaranteed tomorrow, and we need to make sure that while these students are on our campuses, they are safe and they are successful. And I think that's what Tata wants. That's what Cole House wants. And of course, that's what Mother wants for their children. They want them to be safe and successful. Mr. Joe, I think, unless there's any other questions, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap it up. Okay. All right. So I want to thank you all for your time this evening and listening to me speak on education. There's only a few things in life that I feel qualified to really speak on, education being one of them. And I am glad that you listen to my thoughts, my comments. I hope you come see Ragtime, and I hope my thoughts and comments were helpful. They were insightful, maybe help reframe some of your thoughts. Education is not about what it could be; it's more about what it is, and we need to understand that and understand. All right, so thank you.
Awesome, Gabe. Thank you so, so much to Gabe for sharing. I was so encouraged by all of the wonderful things that he shared, and it makes me even more excited to see Ragtime. So if you're interested in seeing Ragtime, make sure you get your tickets on skycrest.net/ragtime. The weekends for Ragtime are the last 2 weekends in February. The live stream or outdoor screening is going to be at 7 p.m. Make sure you join us right here next Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. Again, we're having Derek Scott come, and he is going to he's going to teach us about the symbolism in ragtime and how we have this imagery of disruption, of injustice, safe haven, and what that's like for people of color in the world today. So you definitely won't want to miss Reverend Scott coming to teach us about that next week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful evening.
All right.